of baseball is mentally based, I think, and I know that you all know that. One of the challenges and one of the beauties of baseball is that that number is really, really high. Football, you get to put the pads on and go knock guys around. Very, very physical, and obviously baseball has a physical component to it as well, but there's just such a high mental demand for you, not only offensively at the plate, but those of you that are pitchers when you're on the mound, and then you don't get away from it defensively either. Whatever position you play, there's a huge mental component to that too, especially if you throw in an error or some lack of confidence in your throw, or your fielding ability for a fleeting moment or whatever. It can be really, really tough mentally to kind of navigate your way through that. So that's one of the things that we talked about last week. And then we kind of went over the journal, which everybody has. Nice to see that those are getting some scuff and some wear. For those of you that have had them and have been using them, that's going to be our vehicle for learning for this. We're going to approach this like a class. And the bottom line is there's only going to be 6 of these, and at this point there's only going to be 5 of them because we've got one done already. So that totals about 100 or 120 minutes-ish roughly of time, and that's just enough to barely scratch the surface in terms of what the mental demands are for baseball. So we're going to approach this with the idea that I'm going to expose you to some resources, give you some things that you can kind of look at and study and dive into deeper, with the realization being that some of you are going to take the ball and run with it because it just is that interesting to you. And for others of you, it might not be as interesting, and that's fine. But we do just want to set it up so that there is enough depth in the pool for those of you guys who really want to attack kind of the mental side of baseball, because I would guess not only do you want to be as successful as possible as Mavericks, I would trust that several of you want to keep playing after Legion Ball is over, and then we've got this high school season that's coming up as well, and I trust that you all want to be as good as you possibly can be when that comes. And so you're going to be teaching yourselves more than I'm ever going to be able to teach you. You're going to teach one another more than I can even possibly begin to cover. So again, I just want to expose you to some stuff and trust then that you're going to dive into it with some vigor and some energy to learn more about it. And that's the primary mechanism that the journal is going to do. Our homework assignment 2 weeks ago was to identify one mental strength that you think you have, and then one mental area where you think you could do a little bit better job. We're not going to call it a weakness. We're just going to call it something where you'd like to become better at that, whatever that is. And maybe you have no idea, so you got to go do some homework and some research on that to figure out, well, what are the various mental skills? What do I think I'm good at? And where might I need to improve to get even better? And if you want to improve at baseball, the quickest way to do that is to attack whatever your liabilities are. Those things that you're not good at, if you can turn those into strengths, you're going to make massive gains and leaps in your baseball playing ability. The other thing we talked about with those journals then is just treat them with some respect. If you don't want people reading what you put in there, then take care of them and keep it private for yourself. If you want to show your buddies or your parents or anybody else, then that's fine as well. But just have an approach to how you work with those journals and give them the respect they deserve then as a document, because again, the primary learning for all of this is going to run right through those journals with the stuff that we talk about. All right, with that being said, I want to open it up just real quick instead of me talking all the time. With any questions you might have, any comments or anything that's standing out for you at this point. All right. So everybody take one of those. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. So the late, great Kobe Bryant talked about getting in the pocket. That's how he attacked performance, is he tried to get himself into what he labeled as the pocket as consistently as he could. And the pocket is that spot where you're not too high and you're not too low. You're just at that kind of sweet Goldilocks spot where you're able to go out and meet the performance demands of whatever sport environment that you're in. And that's going to vary. It's going to vary by sport, and it's going to vary by personality and by person. Some people function really, really well at a pocket that's way up here. They're super amped up, they're super excited, they're really, really jacked. And other people function and perform a lot better if that pocket is lower. They're calm, they're relaxed, they're chill. And again, you have to know yourself well enough to figure out, where's my optimal pocket? What level of arousal do I need to be at to be able to go out and get in the batter's box and be a competitive swinger? What do I need to do as somebody on the mound to deliver my best stuff as consistently as I can? And then again, positionally, whatever you're playing, how can I be the best defensive player I can be? How focused, how locked in, how dialed in do I need to be able to do that? So part of your journey with this mental stuff is going to be to figure out what your individual pocket is. One of the ways to help you find that pocket then is to control your breathing. Right? If we don't breathe, we die. And yet, as significant and as important as that is, most of us, unless we're trained in yoga, which most of us aren't, we spend zero time every day thinking about our breathing. We just trust that it's going to happen, and it does happen, and we go on living our lives. The challenge is, at times, we would benefit from taking more overt control and more conscious control of our breathing, especially as environmental demands and situations ramp up a little bit. We can switch it off autopilot and be more conscious with our breathing, and we're going to reap a lot of rewards from a performance standpoint if we do that. So the sheet that I handed out to you just gives you some different options or some different strategies in terms of taking kind of conscious control of your breathing. And it's literally something you can do a couple of minutes a day. And for a very, very small investment, you can reap a lot of reward by doing that. Again, putting homework on you guys in terms of things that you can do when we're not meeting like this to ultimately get yourselves better. The first one is just what's called a 4-4-4-4 method, otherwise known as tactical breathing or box breathing. You picture a square divided up and you've got a 4 in each box. You breathe into 4, you hold to 4, you exhale to 4, you wait to 4, and then you start it over again. And you go through a couple of cycles of that. The U.S. military has really grabbed onto this, primarily the special operations community, because they've realized how beneficial that is as guys get into austere and hostile environments. One of the things that happens is you get tight, and you get nervous, and you get anxious, and as you do that, you're literally cutting off a big chunk of your diaphragmatic breathing because you're carrying that stress up here. And those guys then just, wait a second, let's drop that down. Let's visualize and think about that box. Breath to 4, hold to 4, out to 4, wait to 4, and do it again. For shooters, right, for combat situations, the military is really, really latched onto this. And so why not consider it then as sport performers? There's some challenges with it because we have to vary the cycling of those 4s. They can't be equal in length. And so that's where some of these other strategies come into play. The 4-7-8 is just breathing into 4, holding for a 7 count, releasing to an 8 count, and then starting it all over again. So the key with any kind of breathing exercise is to make sure your exhales are longer than your inhales, and your wait times are longer than your inhale times, if that makes sense. So again, breathing into a 4, and now I'm going to hold that breath to a count of 7. And then after I hit 7, I'm going to release all that to a count of 8. So we're really slowing things down from a breathing standpoint. You flip the page then. 406 method is just something I've messed around with some of the populations that I work, primarily Grizzly student athletes. And for some of them it resonates, usually the guys that are from Montana. That's where the 406 area code comes into play. And the 4 is a breathe into 4. The 0 is a hold, but you visualize coloring in that 0 with a pen or a pencil. And that's what slows down the breathing cycle then, as you visualize coloring in that 0. and then the 6 is the release. Exhaling to 6 and then start over again. Andrew Huberman, who's at Stanford, at his performance lab, advocates for this thing called the physiological sigh, and there's a lot of research behind that. If you watch kids who are having a crying fit and they're sobbing like that, they're actually starving themselves out from oxygen, and that sigh, that heaving that they're doing is the body's attempt then to be able to get oxygenated again. And so that's where the physiological sigh comes in. So take a deep breath and then just take in one more and then release it, and do that a couple of times. And then the last one, if all that is just crazy and doesn't make any sense and there's too many numbers to remember and you're confused, you can just do 4 or 5 or 6 deep breaths. And do that 4 or 5 times. And now, very, very quickly, we've primed our system. We've done a lot of things. We've oxygenated enough to be able to help our performance environments, because your muscles need what? Your muscles need oxygen in order to fire glucose and become the energy source that you need. And then you've done a lot of other things in terms of heart rate variability and calming your mind down. And so again, just simply taking overt control of your breathing helps do a lot of